Spark Books here. Today, I'm going to explain the book, Set Boundaries, Find Peace, by Nedra Tawwab. Take care, enjoy the book, and have a nice day. Set Boundaries, Find Peace 2021 lays out everything you need to know about boundaries, what they are, why you need them, and how to implement them in your life right now. By breaking down the ins and outs of setting healthy boundaries, these sparks will leave you feeling confident and empowered to finally tackle those thorny conversations that you've been avoiding for so long. Key idea number 1. Healthy partnerships require boundaries. Do you need boundaries? Signs. Setting boundaries is difficult. We fear appearing stuffy, needy, or oversensitive. Awkwardness may even hurt the relationship. However, not creating boundaries is detrimental. Allowing others to cross our boundaries will degrade our relationships. Boundaries are uncomfortable. However, short-term discomfort is worth it for long-term partnerships. Consider some questions. Do you often feel overworked, pressured, or burned out? Do you have trouble turning down friends, family, and co-workers? Do you avoid folks who make you uncomfortable? If you responded yes to any of these, you may have boundary issues. As different as these issues may seem, they all stem from the same issue. You've put others' needs before yours. Boundaries are self-defense. Healthy boundaries entail trusting others to treat you well. Healthy partnerships require healthy boundaries. Our body and personal space are our first boundaries. During a conversation, someone getting too close to your face can be uncomfortable. Physical barriers are one of 6 types of boundaries. Sexual boundaries prevent inappropriate conversation subjects, sexually charged jokes, and other unacceptable behavior. Intellectual and emotional limits involve others respecting our thoughts and feelings even if they disagree. Material boundaries govern how people utilize our goods. Finally, time constraints let others appreciate our time. Personal space and other cultural boundaries shouldn't need to be stated. We need to communicate personal boundaries. For instance, you may need to tell a new acquaintance that you prefer handshakes than hugs. Setting boundaries is difficult. We fear appearing stuffy, needy, or oversensitive. Awkwardness may even hurt the relationship. However, not creating boundaries is detrimental. Allowing others to cross our boundaries will degrade our relationships. Boundaries are uncomfortable. However, short-term discomfort is worth it for long-term partnerships. Key idea number 2. Too permeable or too rigid boundaries generate most relationship issues. Like a cell membrane, your borders allow useful chemicals in, but stop harmful ones. Your borders should be like cell membranes, balancing positive and negative impacts. Healthy boundaries lie between porous and hard. When you can balance your needs with those of others, you have healthy limits. If you don't strike this equilibrium, you risk relationship problems. If your boundaries are too permeable, you may absorb others' demands and feelings. However, if your boundaries are too stiff, you risk emotional isolation and loneliness. Key point: too permeable or too rigid boundaries generate most relationship issues. Porous borders lack strength, rigidity, or expression. They often lack emotional separation, are dependent, or people please. Porous boundaries can cause emotional enmeshment and codependency at its worst. Enmeshment occurs when two people's emotional lives blend. Enmeshment is best illustrated by couples who spend every waking second together. Codependency is imbalanced enmeshment. One person spends their life fixing the other's problems in codependent relationships. This arrangement is bad for both parties since one never gets their wants addressed and the other never learns to solve their own problems. Porous boundary sufferers must regain autonomy. First, remove yourself physically and emotionally. Self-care and reducing support are crucial. People with strong boundaries have trouble getting close to others. Counterdependency, emotional detachment, and incapacity to exhibit vulnerability is the most pathological kind of strict boundaries. Counterdependency occurs when you ghost a date because they confess their love. Practice close interactions to overcome stiff barriers. That involves practicing communicating, asking for help, and loving. Healthy boundaries lie between porous and hard. When you can balance your needs with those of others, you have healthy limits. Key idea number 3. Healthy boundaries demand clear communication and regular action. Without clear boundaries, they manifest indirectly. Passive-aggressive speech is trendy but ineffectual. That includes setting an example. If you want your partner to be honest with her. Second, Consistency requires respecting others' boundaries. Healthy relationships are mutual. If you violate others' boundaries, they won't respect yours. Thus, defining boundaries benefits both partners. Respecting limits is the best approach to have yours respected. Passive aggressiveness is a poor boundary setting technique. We act out our hurt and hope the other person realizes their mistake. This usually frustrates the other person, who is unaware of the issue. Passive aggressiveness is widespread in love relationships because we want our partners to read our minds. However, your spouse cannot read your thinking. Thus, state your needs clearly. Communicating a boundary directly requires verbal and physical action. The takeaway: healthy boundaries require clear communication and regular action. Assertiveness is key. Assertiveness lets you express your desires without blaming others. Directly stating boundaries reduces the potential of misinterpretation. I want, need, or anticipate are assertive boundary phrases. I want you to stop asking me when I'm getting married, you might tell your mother. Set boundaries without apologizing or explaining. Do not appear flexible. Communication doesn't end boundary setting. Your boundaries won't be respected unless you follow through. That includes setting an example. If you want your partner to be honest with her. Second, consistency requires respecting others' boundaries. Healthy relationships are mutual. If you violate others' boundaries, they won't respect yours. Thus, defining boundaries benefits both partners. Respecting limits is the best approach to have yours respected. Key idea number 4, boundary violations require consequences. Setting limits is easy to say but hard to do. You may decide to end a relationship or remove yourself. You decide how often you volunteer. You don't have to spend time with disrespectful or draining people. You may still care for them. It's self-preservation. Self-care will be covered in the next blink. Yes, concerns and worries often restrict us from expressing our true feelings. We spin in our thoughts worrying about offending or being misunderstood. However, courteous inquiries are usually granted. However, some are immature. Some may challenge your boundary. Sometimes individuals ignore your boundary and pretend they didn't hear you. These replies indicate a relationship reevaluation. That could include setting boundaries or signaling that the partnership isn't functioning. The point: boundary violations require consequences. You can ignore small boundary violations. If a drunk stranger at a party talks for 30 minutes about his difficulties, it's probably easier to walk away than have an intimate chat about boundaries. If someone repeatedly violates boundaries, you must act. Boundary violations damage relationships if ignored. Restate your boundaries before adopting dramatic measures. We always debate about politics, for instance. Please stick to other topics. If someone persists in violating your limits, you must take action. If your mother keeps showing up at your door without calling, you may need to bar her until she gets the message. You may decide to end a relationship or remove yourself. You decide how often you volunteer. You don't have to spend time with disrespectful or draining people. You may still care for them. It's self-preservation. Self-care will be covered in the next blink. Key idea number 5, self-love is part of healthy boundaries. Misunderstanding boundaries is one reason we avoid setting them. We think limits are about emotional distance and real relationships are unselfish. Women are advised that being a good wife or mother requires selflessness. Other self-care methods include spending time with positive people, doing things you enjoy, and learning and developing yourself. Finally, self-boundaries are not restricted. Consider them positive influences on your well-being, values, and relationships. However, housewives and moms often become depressed, burned out, and unmotivated. It's obvious that selflessness is ineffective. Without energy, time, or delight, how can someone serve others? Empty cups cannot be poured. Boundaries are not just about how others treat us. Self-care requires boundaries too. Helping others requires self-care. Healthy boundaries are also about self-care. What is self-discipline? Self-boundaries keep you from bad habits. Self-boundaries protect you from squandering money or time on unnecessary items. Self-boundaries go beyond saying no. They're also about self-love and self-care. Self-care goes beyond occasional spa visits. Spending money is not self-care. Authenticity is self-care. It's about respecting yourself enough to meet your needs. Saying no when you're too busy is self-care. Saying no gives you more energy and excitement for the things you say yes to. Other self-care methods include spending time with positive people, doing things you enjoy, and learning and developing yourself. Finally, self-boundaries are not restricted. Consider them positive influences on your well-being, values, and relationships. Key idea number 6. Adulthood requires familial boundaries. Setting limits in family, especially parent-child relationships, is difficult. These connection dynamics are decades old and unlikely to change quickly. We must set limits with our parents to grow up. We only become independent by setting limits with our parents. However, those who fail to set development boundaries will always be children. The author worked with a woman whose marriage was failing because her husband was closer to his mother than to her. This woman had trouble taking her spouse seriously since he couldn't make decisions without consulting his mother. If this sounds familiar, you need family limits. Key point: adulthood requires familial boundaries. Family borders start with distance. That means seeing or calling them less. Keeping personal facts private emotionally creates distance. Practice willpower next. Start solving difficulties and making decisions on your own. There are other, lesser ways to gain self-autonomy. For instance, by openly expressing your opinions, even if they disagree. Remember that this advice works both ways. It's easy to forget that your kids have boundaries, so respect them within reason. A child setting a boundary may refuse a food or scream near a person. Respecting your children's boundaries encourages assertiveness and strong relationships. When you accept a child's boundary, you're telling her she has influence over her life and that her needs and preferences matter. As counterintuitive as it may seem, family limits are necessary for equal, autonomous adulthood. Key idea number 7. Setting office limits helps you enjoy and perform well. Society is overworked. Too many of us exceed the 40-hour work week in our contracts. We work nights and weekends when we should be resting. We accept colleagues' extra projects even though they're not ours. We don't use all our vacation days out of a misguided sense of guilt. In 2018, U.S. workers wasted 768 million paid days off. We have leaky professional boundaries even if we have healthy personal limits. Because we dread being viewed as bad employees, setting limits with our employer and team members is harder. Again, this approach is counterproductive because overwork and exhaustion degrade work and life. Work-life balance is improved by setting boundaries. That involves increasing your health and office performance. The takeaway: office boundaries are vital for workplace satisfaction and success. Setting boundaries at work starts with rejecting the concept that being a good employee implies saying yes to everything. Overworking and doing everything half-heartedly is bad. When you say no to extra work, you're saying yes to completing it well. To avoid guilting you into working longer, finish your work during working hours. When you're busy, delegate duties. Telling coworkers you'd rather talk during lunch is another option. Tell your manager if your workload remains too much. Boss boundaries can be scary. However, telling your boss your limits is preferable than suffering in silence. After feeling the calm and control, you'll wonder why you didn't try it sooner. Key idea number 8. Set love boundaries by articulating your wants and future expectations. What matters most in a love relationship? Communication. How you will split funds, household duties, and fidelity are other conflict-prone areas that should be discussed early on. The last conversation should be entertaining. You may be deep in a relationship and have avoided these major conversations. Now what? Well, time for a tough talk. Uncomfortable conversations save relationships. You should know where to address limits and expectations from past disagreements. You may even find that boundaries add passion to your relationship by reintroducing distance and separation. Poor communication causes divorce and breakups and is the main reason couples seek counseling. What exactly is poor communication? Inability to set boundaries. Couples use passive-aggressive communication when they can't express their boundaries. Fearing rejection, couples avoid direct inquiries. This worry is baseless. In relationship counseling, couples who learn to make clear, direct demands reduce their fights. Your partner may surprise you by being open to honest conversation and meeting most of your demands. Key point: set love boundaries by articulating your wants and future expectations. Setting boundaries and expectations should be one of your first joint tasks. Being honest about how you want to be treated and what you want from the relationship will save you both time and misery in the long run. Unfortunately, many couples avoid difficult conversations. Many couples don't talk about marriage and kids until years into the relationship, only to find out they want completely different things. During the first few dates, kids are definitely best avoided. While getting to know someone, be free to discuss your relationship expectations. How you will split funds, household duties, and fidelity are other conflict-prone areas that should be discussed early on. The last conversation should be entertaining. You may be deep in a relationship and have avoided these major conversations. Now what? Well, time for a tough talk. Uncomfortable conversations save relationships. You should know where to address limits and expectations from past disagreements. You may even find that boundaries add passion to your relationship by reintroducing distance and separation. From work overload to family disagreements, your problems stem from an unwillingness to set healthy boundaries. Thus, addressing this issue could improve your quality of life overall. That said, here's a napkin-sized description of the steps.
To view more content like this, subscribe. Don't forget to like and turn on notifications. The channel really benefits from it. I appreciate you being here.